Perfect. I think I see more participants showing up. So I'll start off by welcoming everyone this evening, and I will. So I see that we have Councilmember Kathy, Councilmember Schneider, Councilmember Jefferson, Councilmember Dalhoff, and Councilmember Althauser. And Councilmember Agabi.
I'm here.
Hello. So I think Councilmember Swarthout should be here shortly. So I will go ahead and turn it over to the chair of the school board.
Thanks, Debbie. We have here with us tonight Director Killow and Director Beard, and right on cue, Director Sale. And Director Kaikkonen is not able to join us tonight. And then we also, of course, have Sean Dotson here with us. And I'm Casey.
And I did not introduce City Administrator John Down. And Councilmember Swarthout. So, so I will turn it over if nobody has any questions. All right. So John, did you have anything before we started, or Sean, did you have anything before we started?
No, I think we're going to jump. We'll come in and the second half and really assist with this, but we're starting off with our friends from Puget Sound ESD, Eileen Yoshina and Matthew Goldbranson, who are going to lead us off tonight.
Perfect.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for having us back. It has been a real pleasure and an honor to be with you on this journey that is far longer than 21 days, but has, I think, provided us this really great opportunity to have important conversations and do some learning in really great ways together. And Matthew and I have said this many times, but just this partnership between the city and the school district, we think is really powerful and something that's a real strength in this community, and something I really, I think we're going to talk a lot about as one of the resources you'll have to draw on as we move this conversation forward. So just hello and nice to see you for our final session together. And we're ready to have a good conversation. Matthew, you want to say hello or anything?
Hi. It's kind of crazy. This is our last session, but it's been a great journey, and it's been, like Eileen said, it's just been an honor to be with you all and you know, support you in this journey.
Okay, so we had the opportunity to meet with Sean and John and kind of talk about you know, what would be really relevant. And, you know, unfortunately, but probably not surprisingly, there are some real life examples of ways in which we can start thinking about how to put all of the work that you've done and all the learning you've done together into some kind of action plan for yourselves, and then as collectively as a group of community leaders. We think you have a really, really incredible, powerful opportunity to do some meaningful work. So we're here to facilitate the conversation for the first half of the session. And then we will be here and turn over the facilitation to Sean Dotson and John Doan for the second half of our time together. So with that, we will get started. And as we always do, we're going to start by honoring Indigenous people, land, and water. So once again, just giving that recognition and that taking that moment of reflection and appreciation for the traditional caretakers of the land that we are on here in this area, the Squaxin Island tribe and the Nisqually tribe, We're the traditional caretakers of this area, and people for whom we can be grateful every single day for the work that they do consistently and in an ongoing way to really ask us to also be caretakers of the land that we are on. And I think one of the things that we're thinking about as we're thinking about putting our learning and our words into action is to think about in what ways can we be better partners to our tribal communities? In what way, what does that look like for every single one of us? What learning is important for all of us as we move forward? What commitments can we make to ensuring that our children have respectful and authentic relationships with our tribal neighbors? And what commitments can we make to the children of our tribal neighbors to ensure that they grow up in a community that honors and welcomes and respects their heritage and their continued and enduring presence here as well. So just take that moment of reflection for our Native communities. Hey, Matthew, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so as always, we come back to our community agreements and practices. These ways of being together that form this container that which we can engage in this work together, engage with ourselves, and be in closer partnership and leaning into critical conversations so we can actually get to work and get down the road. So thinking about staying engaged, where are you in the moment right now? Mind, body, heart, where are your learning edges? How can we kind of lean into those edges of discomfort this evening? Speaking your truth, honoring your truth and where it comes from, and saying it in a way that's true for you, knowing that we're not going to solve all of this tonight or this next year, at the same time holding that urgency in place, that this is a critical issue every day for our communities. And then intent and impact. So keeping our relationships at the center of this work, continuing to build trust, owning our impact if we say or do something that harms another person. So just a brief touching base on our practices together.
Okay, so one person that we want to introduce you to, if you're not familiar with her already, is Dr. Bettina Love. She wrote this incredible book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. And as we are getting ready to have a conversation and an opportunity to reflect on what does putting this learning into action mean for us personally, and what does it mean for us collectively as a group of community leaders, we really think she has some wonderful inspirational insight to offer and give us ways to think about doing this work together. So she's going to talk about what she sees as the difference between being a co-conspirator and an ally, an abolitionist and an ally. So we're gonna let her share her wisdom around that, and then we'll come back on the other side to see what reflections you have about what it means to really become a co-conspirator in this work.
Do you have the video up? I have it if you don't.
Oh, can you put it up? I have to close 8 tabs. Okay.
Hold on just a second.
I want you to sit with is, can you identify, once Dr. Love gives us a definition, can you identify a co-conspirator that you've had in your work? And can you break down for us this difference between an ally and a co-conspirator?
Yeah, so
I bet you can.
So, the book is about like this idea of abolitionist teaching, right? And so, shout out to upstate New York. I'm from upstate New York. We don't like New Yorkers, but that's okay. Because when you're from upstate New York, like, where are you from? I'm from upstate. Queens? No. Brooklyn? No. Albany? No. I'm from upstate New York, Rochester, New York, 90 miles from Canada, right? And so, so we had abolitionists in upstate New York. That's where I grew up. And the one thing about an abolitionist had to be a co-conspirator. I mean, I want y'all for a second to just think about the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad freed over 100,000 enslaved Africans and black folks. Right? Think about this. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. This was all off trust and love of each other. And to say that this system of racism and bondage, no more.
Yeah.
We did that. It was everyday people. Farmers, bankers, doctors, teachers, nurses, all ethnicities. We did that as a country. Someone came to your door, gave you a code, you just had to trust them. And so I wanted to bring that back. What would it mean for us in 2019 to think about what it would mean to be an abolitionist and to be a co-conspirator? And in the book, I use James Tyson. Now, many people are not familiar with who James Tyson is. You know Bree Newsom. Bree Newsom was the young black woman who took that Confederate flag down in South Carolina 8 days after Dylann Roof went into the AME church. And I tell the story in the book because I think this is an important story because Bree Newsom and James Tyson did not know each other. There were some folks who got together and said, that flag is coming down. They said, and a black woman's gonna take it down. They taught Bree how to climb. They had Bree's bail money ready. And that morning, Bree Newsom and James Tyson were at an IHOP. They got the word, come take the flag down. Bree Newsom climbs up on the pole to take the flag down. Now, this is where the difference between an ally and a co-conspirator is. James Tyson, now there's a gate for the flagpole. James Tyson isn't standing like outside the gate. Okay, like Bree, they coming, Bree. Hey, Bree. No, James Tyson, he is inside. And then the police say, you know what? We can get her down. Tase the pole. James Tyson, because he wasn't here, he was here, said, okay. He put his hand on the pole. That white man at that moment understood why he was there. He put his hand on the pole, and he knew that the police would not tase that pole with a white man, healthy white man, right there. He saved her life. That's what it means to be an ally. You can stand out there, and allies know all the language. They read all the books. They come to the meeting with all the terms. Right? They read the report before you read the report. Right? I always say allies make black folks feel bad. Like, did you read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book? Like, damn, I didn't read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book. Like, I've been busy being black. Right? So I didn't read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book, but I know it's fire. Right? So they come and they know everything and they good. And then after the meeting, you're like, well, what we gonna do? You're like, they left already? Where'd they go?
I'm gonna call an Uber.
Right? So that's the difference between being an ally and a co-conspirator. And this is back to that abolitionist, is to put something on the line for somebody.
Yeah.
Take a risk to see how to use your whiteness. And I tell folks all the time, whiteness is like a bank. And it just, your ATM card just replenishes itself. So spend it. As the kids say, cash out. Right? Cash out. It's gonna come right back. And so to be a co-conspirator, I try to write in the book, is to take risks for somebody. To put something on the line, but to use it in a way in which where you're using your privilege.
Yeah.
Yes.
Use it. And I'm not just talking about white folks, I'm talking about cisgender folks. Use it for trans folks, like use it for queer folks.
Yeah.
Like put something on the line, take a risk. It doesn't have to be small risk, big risk. James Tyson simply said here, put his hand on the pole. That's it. And that's what we are talking about with co-conspirators. Allies, they know everything, they can say, they can talk it. But when it's time, they're not there. And if they're there, they're looking at you like, you going? Oh, you go. You go on the front lines, right? Black folks and brown folks, we don't want to fight racism. The Creator did not put me here to fight racism.
Yeah.
If you believe that, that's racist. I should be here and be in my full life and be my full self and my full human.
Yes.
But I gotta fight what y'all created. So they gotta come to the table with something more than just, I read the new book.
Right.
Right, take a risk.
So having heard that.
Okay. What did you hear her say? What did you hear Dr. Love say? What are some takeaways? Yes, Eileen, go ahead.
I wrote down, put something on the line for someone. So.
Yeah, great, thank you. What were some other takeaways that people had? Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Debbie.
I would say we need to be less passive. We need to be more engaged and less passive. It's really easy, I think, to stay in the passive mode and, you know, support people doing other things, but we need to not be passive in how we assist and move this forward.
Great. Thank you. Michael, go ahead.
It kind of one of the quotes that's really resonated with me throughout this, that it was either the first or second time we met, was the Jay Smooth quote, being good is not an immutable characteristic. And the other half, I had to write it down. The other half is being good is a practice that we carry out by engaging our imperfections. And that really sort of struck a chord with me, because I think it speaks to ongoing duty. Like, it's not check a box and you're done, but it speaks to the fact that, you know, these things have been established, these systems have been established throughout time, and that we can't just do a training and now, you know, we are suddenly allies or we are suddenly anti-racist. It's a constant practice that has to evolve as we evolve, and we have to continue to recognize our own imperfections and our own blinders and our own desires to be better allies, to be better anti-racist friends with our neighbors, with our community. So that's sort of what stuck out to me, is just sort of this common theme that I felt throughout this process.
There's some other takeaways.
This is Angela. I felt like she was saying that there are more anti-racist people than there are racist people. And all throughout, since Martin Luther King days, you know, there were white pastors who came along. So there's always been white allies and anti-racist who came to the support of African Americans. So like Mayor Debbie said, it might be just a small thing, but when you see it, call it out. We can't do it alone as African Americans, and we need help to decrease some of this racism in society. Racism is always going to be there. We can't just get rid of it, but just talk about it like we're doing now, and just become allies. And like those kids at school, right? We know about the Capitol High School incident that happened. Those kids were a perfect example of what she was saying. They took a stand. They walked out of class and they said, you know what? this behavior we're not going to tolerate. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, Lieta.
Thanks, Eileen. One of the things that's adding to everything that's been said is that I am trying to learn to be uncomfortable with the status quo, right? I've been uncomfortable with change and the fear of making a mistake, saying the wrong thing, making things work, but to shift that and become uncomfortable with the status quo. That's what I'm getting from that, right? Is I got to switch that, because it's easy for me, my privilege, to go, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to take that risk, but to shift that paradigm.
Thank you.
So Eileen, thank you. Thank you so much. So what comes to me is actually a story that Angela shared with me a while back. And I hope I'm accurate when I kind of quote her on this story. So Angela, feel free to correct me. So she was talking about a story where she went to, and I don't want to mention the story, but there was 2 white women in line and they checked out and the cashier was very friendly with them and cordial. And then when it got to Angela's turn, they were very rude and obnoxious. And Angela mentioned, Charlie, I know if you were there, you would have spoke up. And she's absolutely correct. And it just comes to mind, well, I'm an ally. I'm a white ally. I didn't look at it that way, but she looked at me as an ally. I'm not sure if the white person, but the ally for sure. And I appreciated that. And I realized, and I didn't realize that before, those little steps make a big difference. So I really appreciated her sharing the story with me about that incident.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other reflections, any other takeaways? So Dr. Love, so to Charlie's point, and I totally hear what you're saying, Charlie, and thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Love uses those words a little bit differently, right? So she has the distinction between the ally and the co-conspirator. And if you read her book, which I highly recommend, it's a wonderful book. It is based around education, and I think there's a lot of application to all walks of life. She's focused on this idea of abolitionism, right? And she's drawing from that historical tradition. And to Council Member Jefferson's point as well, if you think back to the abolitionist era, right, that happened because there were Black abolitionists and there were white abolitionists. So I think one of the powerful things about Dr. Love's work for me is thinking about what does that mean for us to have inherited that abolitionist tradition here in the United States. You know, we know that racism is alive and well in our communities. We've seen various examples in our communities in the last couple of weeks and days, right? If not, you know, over the last many centuries. And we sometimes forget to think about, we also have this legacy of abolitionism. We also have this legacy of the civil rights era, right? We also have this legacy of times and places when communities came together from all walks of life and said, no more, and did some pretty bold and courageous actions to take down inequitable systems. So to me, she's making that distinction and thinking, like really thinking about it, like what does it mean for us to live in that tradition right now? What does it mean for us to live into that legacy of being an abolitionist in this day and age? Anyone have any thoughts on that? That idea of being a co-conspirator and abolitionist. What does it mean to put your hand on the pole? Yeah, Michael.
I think for me, one of the things that I sort of grapple with is that, you know, as individuals in our sort of respective legislative branches, which I think school board counts as a legislative branch. You guys make policy, same way we make policy, pass rules that guide how a government functions, is that, as individuals in that role, we sort of present ourselves to the community as the ones who have the wisdom and the judgment to know the right answer. And that's when we say, I don't know the right answer, that's just sort of an uncomfortable place to be as a public figure, right? Like we try to present ourselves as, the ones who are trying to be incredibly thoughtful and inclusive, and sort of recognizing throughout this process that we aren't is, a very difficult thing to say, but also, a really necessary admission. So I think, like, in part, recognizing that we haven't been fulfilling sort of this promise is a pretty, I think, important first step. Certainly not like a last step, right? But that sort of seems to be the first step, is that there is tremendous room for improvement in our processes, and recognizing that when we've made a lot of decisions, that it's sort of been let's think of the solution before we ask the question to the people who are impacted the most by certain policies and certain things. So I think admitting that our process needs adjustment, needs a course correction, might be one of those first steps and first actions. I don't know if I'd equate it to putting the hand on the pole. Maybe it's more like looking at the pole from a semi-close distance and saying that there's something, there's an action we should take, because putting your hand on the pole is probably more like, once you've decided or admitted that you need to put your hand on the pole, then you actually go do it. And I think we'll probably talk about some of those things or ideas for ways we can do that later. I think is on the agenda, but that sort of seems to be, to me, to be sort of one of those initial kind of preliminary actions or thoughts.
Love that. Thank you. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Debbie.
So one of the things that really worries me right now is the political climate. And I mean, I just feel like this tsunami of racism, white supremacy, all of that. It just feels like there's this tsunami coming and going to hit us. And I'm feeling a bit, I don't know, overwhelmed yet, but I'm feeling like we're going to come to a point with how are we going to deal with this feeling of a tsunami coming at us. I mean, I know all of this was always there. It's not hidden anymore. And it's feels like, and it's more powerful. When it was hidden, it didn't feel as powerful, but it feels very powerful now. And so I'm really thinking about and looking at, how do we hold back that tidal wave or address the tidal wave? How do we mitigate the tidal wave? What do we do? And so that's something that I have been thinking about a lot in the last few months, and I actually worry about it.
And I think that is exactly why we're having this conversation. And when Matthew and I met with Sean and John, the thing that we talked about is that you're actually in a great space right now to have this conversation. So you're right. Matthew and I work with schools and communities all up and down I-5 and even from out of the region. And this is not, the things that are happening in Olympia, and you probably have heard about what's happening in North Thurston School District as well, right? Those are not unique at all. And so I think we would be very naive to say, and I haven't heard that here, so I'm not saying this is happening. I think they're in these moments, there's always a temptation to sort of say, oh, look at those communities. They don't have it figured out. We're doing the good work here, right? There's always this moment where when it happens to someone else, it can feel like an opportunity to look out the window instead of in the mirror, right? And to say like, well, if they should have done this, if they would have done that, I would have done it this way. And I think it would be really unfortunate to miss the opportunity to do that mirror work and say, how is what's happening right next door to us in both our neighboring communities happening here today? It's just not on film yet, right? And I have a principal friend in one of those 2 districts who told me, who's an elementary school principal, and he was talking to his students, and the students there said, oh, this happens all the time. They're just lucky we don't have phones, right? Because it's happening to little kids. And we, like they said, they're just not recording it and posting it to social media in the same way. So, for any one of our communities to think that we're immune or that we've adequately prepared or could prevent what's happening, I think would be a mistake. So to have the opportunity to have a thoughtful, reflective moment is something that I think we should take advantage of with this group of community leaders right here and now. And that's what we are really hoping to do today. So yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
I also wanted to loop back to something that I don't remember which session it was, but I remember us talking about that. It was this cycle of adult behavior change. And the first bubble on it was our racial equity analysis. And then the second bubble was our why and our purpose for why we're doing this. And there's an analogy that I always love from Adrienne Marie Brown from her book Emergent Strategies about this old oak grove in Louisiana that survived. They were the oldest trees to survive Hurricane Katrina because the root systems are connected to each other. And I feel like that's such a great analogy for this work and this moment, because if we're grounded and rooted in our analysis of what we know, of our history, of how it plays out, and all of those things, and our purpose and our why for doing this work is all connected as a collective, that is how we weather that. That is how we stay firmly rooted in our history and what we know is our truth and how this is embedded in our institutions, in our history, in our systems, and in ourselves. And so we're not perpetuating that same thing that we are wanting to change.
Okay. To that end, I think we should shift gears a little bit.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So today in Lacey at Lakeside High School, students were sent home because of this very topic. And I spent 8 hours today getting notification from parents that work for DOH that lives in Lacey with anxiety and fear. And as a parent that have kids in the Tumwater School District, I got so sidetracked that I spent the amount of time just trying not to go with the IM message that was flying back and forth. But it's difficult not to do that because I have had to deal with that in Tumwater School District. So the question then is, how do parents of color deal with this? I mean, there has to be some kind of, I don't know. I know it's naive to say that there's going to be a solution, but how do parents of color spend their day thinking about this, dealing with this? My son have a friend who live in, go to Tumwater School. His wife, he spent all of his time in my household. And when they go to the movie, I say to my son, you have to remember you're different. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. But he does not understand what I'm telling him. He sees what his friend is doing. He wants to participate in the same activities. But those activities would get him in trouble. And they are just what kids do. We all did the same when we were kids. But in this environment, how do parents of color navigate this issue? I mean, I don't know.
I thank you so much for sharing that. I can hear in your voice that concern, that fear, that love you have for your son. And I personally, and I hope the rest of us in this meeting heard that, right? And to say this is the moment when it's on us, particularly if we're not Black, particularly if we're not people of color, to step up and say, how do I help shoulder this burden that our parents and families of color are living with every single day? And at moments like this, when there are real and actual threats to children's safety, how am I part of how do I put my hand on the pole right now, right? If there are kids who are at risk, what am I gonna do to let them know I'm a community leader and you are safe here, right? What does that look like? This is a meeting full of community leaders, and you heard directly from a parent of color who happens to also be a community leader, and one of you, right? So I think what Councilmember Agabi just offered us is the question right there, right? So I heard some needs in what he said. I heard some points of reflection. So I just want us all to hold on to what he shared and say, that's what we're working on right here. We're working on Peter's son. We're working for Peter's son, right? Not some abstract community, but somebody I know, somebody I work with is really afraid for their child. That's what we're doing here. So I thank you so much for sharing that and for offering this opportunity for us to really make this real.
Eileen, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Thanks. Taking what Peter just said with tonight, I really want to, I know for myself with council, it's an easy detachment from the school district, right? So I was really hoping that maybe us council members could create a little bit of space or more space, because I feel like we monopolize a lot on these meetings just because this is our style. We come in, we talk, we engage, right? That if we can make some space for our school district peeps tonight, and I'd like to just check in and see how they're doing and what they're going through as well. So I'm not telling council members to be quiet, but I think that we should be quiet.
How does that sound, especially for our school board folks? All right. To that end, anybody want to chime in here from the school board?
Well, thank you, Lietta. Not that you had to tell your fellow council members to be quiet, but it's not that. So what has been consuming my thoughts for months now is, you may or may not know this, my wife teaches. Her dad was a teacher. Many of my friends are teachers. Many of my friends are admin. And I visited a high school in October. This was in October, this story I'm about to tell you. And then I quickly visited an elementary right after, and they both said the exact same thing without me providing a question. They said, this is the most stressed and anxiety-ridden they have seen their students and staff ever. And it was October. And that's across the board. And so, you know, there's a lot of people kind of just riding that thin line of being calm and freaking out right now. And I guess that's just what I was just going to share that you know, usually we see kids and teachers at this point in about May. but they know June is right around the corner, so they can kind of hold on. I'm holding on to that hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. But man, when that feeling is sinking in and it's October, it's quite a weight to bear. And I don't know what to do. And I guess that's why I'm bringing this up. I feel absolutely helpless right now. And I've said this to my fellow colleagues from around the state. I am sick and tired of talking about it. I'm sick and tired of listening to stories about it. I'm ready to do something about it. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like, but I am tired of talking about this. And this can be stress with teachers. This can be racism within our schools. This can be kids who feel empowered to say what they want from the bleachers during a basketball game. So yeah, I'm ready for some action. And I have things underway at work, but work is just work. It needs to carry through and just the normal, everyday, day-to-day. So just keep that in mind. Hey, Scott's ready to do something. He's just not quite sure what. So thank you.
Melissa, go ahead.
So I've been thinking a lot about this also, and I think one place that we can make some space as leaders, as the leaders that we are, is I attended a training, training where, to help teachers learn how to interrupt, when something's going on, how to interrupt that. And what I felt that I could do is tell teachers, if you are working hard, if you are working to help kids figure this out and you are afraid of what a parent may say, I have your back. That's, that's really, in terms of power, the power that we have, I think it's like, if you're working at this, because I don't think people should be shamed for making a mistake. And I think kids should learn why there's such an uproar. I think kids should get a chance to understand why that's not acceptable to members of the community. And I think we should talk about that as a community, why we would take the time to talk with our students and engage in a conversation. I know a lot of people saying, talking about being scared of saying the wrong thing. How can we get to the point that someone says the wrong thing and that someone says, hey, that was the wrong thing. But people don't freak out about it. I know staff are worried about misstepping. They don't want to get in trouble, but how can we show them, there's Tumwater, Tumwater School District has a history of winning, and it's not just about racism, it's about toxic masculinity. There's a lot of things that are going on in our schools where, I know we're talking a lot about racism here, but there's a lot about gender identity that's going on, and it's probably even more acceptable to talk like that than it is to say racist acts. And I don't know if teachers have thought through the training that they have to interrupt racist talk, if they can apply that to when they hear that someone is saying something that is horrible, that is not acceptable at all. It doesn't matter. Like, we all know that it's horrible, but people aren't interrupting that. And so like I said, I know we're focusing on racism, but there are a lot of different ways in which kids are getting harassed and bullied. And how do we equip teachers with the tools to interrupt all of those and tell them, we're going to have your back. If someone is upset, we're going to take the time. We're going to talk with parents. We're also not going to belittle them. We're not going to, if they're going to come in and complain, what I heard Scott saying is like, it is really hard, but I want to tell teachers, it's really hard. And if people come in and complain, again, we have your back. We're going to help you through this. But don't belittle someone because they're complaining, or they're making your job harder because they're coming in to tell you that their kid is getting bullied. Yeah, that makes the job harder, but they have no place else to go. And they are hurting. They're hurting watching their kid hurt, or they're hurting watching their kid try to stand up for other kids, and they don't know what to do. And there is this idea that everyone is having a hard time, and so maybe the parents aren't saying anything because, like, oh, the teachers have it really hard and I don't want to bother them with this. We have to deal with this.
I think this might be a good moment for us to transition into, we wanted you to I think it's really hard when we know the problems are so big and so entrenched, right? It gets very overwhelming. And so the place to start is always with yourself. Like, what's my locus of control, right? And so the very first place you have control is with what you're gonna do. So we're gonna start there, and then we're gonna move from there to what can we do as a collective community. This is a incredibly powerful group of people in this community, right? So, so we're going to start by that self-reflection and that commitment of our accountability of ourselves, and then we'll transition into the larger collective. Okay. And again, I want to say to you that you have the gift of not being in that media spotlight at this moment, right? So this is offering you like a really important opportunity to do the work and to have a conversation about what's the community we want to be. So to like Melissa's point about, I think children should have the opportunity to learn. That conversation gets hard when kids are in the middle of pain and hurt, when something is in the middle of the news, then it's a really hard conversation to have. So taking this moment right here to say, let's decide now what it means to, if we really believe in having a restorative community, let's commit to that and let's talk about what that looks like now, so that when the time comes, we can be grounded in that and really firmly grounded in our why about what does that actually look like and mean, right? We'll talk about this in a minute, but the temptation when you're in crisis is to go back to the way things were, right? And so that's what we don't want to do. We want to take this moment as a transformative opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to share with you, these are questions from the 21-day challenge. You can see them right here. And really it comes down to, these are on the challenge itself, but it comes down to the two that are sort of in that orange circle on the side. How will your community, how will your students know that you personally are taking action? And how will you hold yourself accountable? What does that look like, sound like, and feel like for you? Okay, so they gave you a lot of ideas to think about, like what are some steps you can take? What kind of support do you need? Who are the people who are your potential accomplices? Who are the people you need to create relationships with? And what can that practice look like for you? Okay, so to do this, we want to share with you, I don't know, maybe our education folks will be familiar with this thing that we call a Jamboard. And if you're not, you get to visit the wonderful world of Google. So this is a Jamboard. And, okay, hold on, I gotta share the link with you first. So if you click on this link, you should be able to have access to this Jamboard. Let me make sure I gave everybody access, great. All right, you see an anonymous kangaroo on there, so that's great. Okay, so what you're gonna do, if you're not familiar, I'll do like a really brief how-to. Down in the corner, no, I'm wrong. Right here where it says sticky notes, you can click sticky note and the sticky note will pop up. Scott, are you seeing something I'm not seeing?
I don't think we have editing rights because our little sticky note bar is not showing up.
You don't have editing rights. Okay, why? Why? Oh, okay, here's you. Change.
So, yeah.
There we go.
Boom.
So close. I was so close to having the settings right. So close, this being seamless. Okay, so you click on the sticky note pops up and you can type right on here how your answers to these questions. So you can do one sticky note per question. And then once you type it, I will attend student listening session tomorrow. I don't know that that's happening. I'm just making that up as an example, right? And then you can click save, and then you'll have a sticky note, and then you can just move it to where you want it on the Jamboard. Okay, so that's how you do that. So we're going to just give you a couple of minutes to think through your own personal commitments. I would encourage you to put your names on these, right? So that accountability piece. Does anybody have any questions about this piece here? So this first part is about like you yourself. What am I committing to? What does action and change look like for me personally as a community leader? Okay, we'll just take another 30 seconds and we're gonna leave this with you so you can continue to add to it and you can use this and refer back to it in future meetings. You know, I think that accountability piece is really important. So think about what you can really commit to. I think if we really want to build that trust with our communities, right, it's important that they see, feel, and hear what our commitment looks like, right? So just understand that and really hold yourselves accountable for what you're committing to, okay? And maybe you can be accountable with each other. Maybe that's something that you might talk about in this next half is like, what is that accountability gonna look like? But just to keep in mind, we wanna make sure our communities see and feel progress and commitment. Okay. All right, you can absolutely continue to write on this, keep posting on it. And turn it over to Matthew to kind of help us transition into the next piece here.
All right, so revisiting something that I know we visited during this 21-day challenge. You know, as I notice you writing things down, like I'm going to show up, I'm going to speak up. Hold on. Just sign into the, can you share the slide, Eileen? It wants to sign me out like every 30 seconds. What we wanted to just bring you back to as a reminder is thinking about that level of racism, of white supremacy. And to Lietta's point, thinking about that specifically in terms of how we're showing up, right? That if we are showing up in ways, if we're speaking up and showing up in ways that are perpetuating the status quo, then we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to have any movement. And we see this happen a lot, where there's great intention. There's, you know, we want to step into some actions. We want to say the things. We want to do the things. We want to show up in ways to make something happen. But if we're showing up in ways that is based in the status quo, is based in white supremacy culture, like either or thinking, like us versus them, like there's only one right way to do it. There's, you know, that we have to be perfect in how we're doing it. It's either this way or it's that way, or we're being paternalistic about it. All that is going to do is reinforce the status quo, that it's not going to get us to that place of transformation. It's not going to get us to that place of healing, and it's not going to get us to that place of liberation and to get us to a different possibility and a different outcome, right? So just this revisiting back to the soil that that we're all rooted in, and to remember to think about how these things show up in ourselves, how these things show up in our ways of being, in our relationship to ourselves, in our relationship to each other, and in our partnership with the community, with the students, with the families. And when we're, you know, when we're challenged, and I think this goes to Mayor Sullivan's point, is like, you know, when the tsunami hits and we're challenged and things are really hard and we're feeling really triggered, it's really hard to not show up in a defensive way. It's really hard to not show up in ways that perpetuate the same thing that we say that we want to change. So that is really deep mirror work that we all need to step into. And this is where it's really helpful to have a group of leaders like yourself that can hold each other in, right? Like if somebody starts getting defensive or going off about us versus them and either or thinking, we can pull each other back in and say, hey, I hear you saying this, and like this reminds me of the status quo. And I don't know if that's really going to be helpful right now in this moment, right? Like there's ways that we can do that, like out of love and out of respect and out of our shared humanity that can bring us to a point where, you know, we're really living into those transformational relationships and partnerships. And that is a real powerful and magical moment in terms of getting ourselves to that transformational place. It's not easy and it's really hard and it takes a lot of practice. But that's why that's where this is born out of. It's born out of so many hard conversations where people get stuck and they get stuck in that status quo and that finite way of thinking and being, where there's no way to move from it. There's no way. So that's our job. I think when I see on those sticky notes is like, I'm going to speak up, I'm going to show up, I'm going to go do this thing. How are you going to speak up? How are you going to show up? How are you going to do those things? And a reminder that we want to show up and speak up in ways that are rooted in that transformational ways of being, right? In that liberation space. Because that's actually what's going to actually move us. So just a quick but very important kind of reminder of that space of action, and we don't want to be reinforcing the same thing that we want to change.
So I think, and it was somebody speaking, I'm sorry, I can't see faces. Okay, as an example of this, and to kind of transition us into our next part of this conversation, you know, again, just going back, I'm just wondering, I'm working on the assumption that everybody's familiar with what happened at Capitol High School and what happened in North Thurston School District, right? Is there anybody that needs some clarification on that?
I'm not sure what happened in North Thurston, but I know what happened in Capitol, if anybody could elaborate.
Yeah, I actually brought I found some links to some news articles so that you can read, but essentially, you said you are familiar with Capitol, with what happened in Olympia School District. Okay, so that happened, and then I think connected to that, and also in response to their own experiences, there was a student walkout at River Ridge High School, led by the Black Student Union and other students of color in the school. So they did a really incredible job planning a day full of activities. So, you know, they weren't skipping school. There were 200 kids that walked out. And they had basically an assembly, and I think, I'm not sure, it might have been the football field or something. They were there for an entire day. Then today, I believe what I understood that happened was that there have been threats made to the school and the school district and to the community from, you know, racist organizations and individuals threatening the safety of the kids and of members of the community, specifically Black members of the community. So because of that, North Thurston Public Schools had to, and I'm not super clear on the details, so maybe somebody knows. I know at least the high school had to shut down and send kids home, which is, I think, what Peter was referring to earlier. I don't know if more than River Ridge was shut down, but I know at least River Ridge had to close because of threats and concerns for children's safety. I don't know if does anyone have anything to add to that? That's what I gathered from news coverage today.
I would have a question, and I want to be super clear as to what we're actually talking about here before we speculate or wade into what we might believe or something. I want to be real clear as to what the actions that happened at these schools that we're going to talk about here.
I don't know that it's necessarily that, again, that instructive to sort of go through with a fine tooth comb what the schools and districts did or didn't do. I think what this opportunity offers us is that chance to look in the mirror. So the question that we have posed to you is, what do you believe? First of all, how is this exact same thing happening in Tumwater? Because it is, right? Like we talked about before, it's not like Olympia and North Thurston school districts are, they are different communities and they're not having a unique experience in regards to the racism that's present in the everyday lives of students in those communities, right? So how is that happening? Like we talked about, like you're in a position where the things that are happening in your community are not in the media spotlight at this moment. So we're asking you to take that opportunity to look in the mirror and say, how is this us? And I think the other question we wanted to really pose to you is, given the recent events in Olympia and Lacey, what do you believe is the role of school and community leadership right now in moments like this?
Eileen, I don't know if you could see, but Peter had unmuted and wanted to say something.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't see that. Go ahead.
I was going to say essentially what you said is what many parents said happened today. So.
Okay, so just confirming that that was an accurate synopsis.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, and then I am looking at Sean and John to say, does this feel like the right moment to sort of transition into a different conversation? Can we leave it within sort of like that big picture question, thinking about what's the role of community leaders, and make that handoff here? Okay, fantastic. And we're here to chime in.
So Sean and I haven't practiced this, so we're making this up as we go. So do you want to start, Sean, or do you want me to start?
I think I'm comfortable either way. I think where we started here in this discussion about the questions that we'd really come in around is, all right, here we have this situation that's occurring. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on what we want to do in our community, both on the side of prevention. How do we create conditions in our community together, going from the personal work of individual, you've all talked about some commitments that you would make, to what do we collectively as a city council, as a school board, how can we work together to create the conditions where what we see happening around us and what's certainly present in our community is less likely to occur. And I think that's the conversation we want to transition to a bit, and John, improve on that, certainly.
Sure. And I would just say this is an extraordinary opportunity to have the leadership of the school district and the city together in this venue. Trust me, this doesn't happen everywhere. And you've made an extraordinary commitment of time, of vulnerability, of learning, of growth. It's pretty amazing. And I have a saying, and I've stole it from someone else, and I have no idea who it was, but who said, great communities have great schools, and great schools exist in great communities. And the success of both of our organizations it really depends on the success of the other, quite frankly. And that can be failure or it can be success. And you all get to choose what that path is. The Capitol High School challenge that we have been talking about and witnessed, and what's then playing out at North Thurston, it's pretty easy to say, wow, I'm glad that's not happening at the city. That's at the school district. Aren't they messed up? But the same way, something can happen in the city, and the folks at the school district can say, we've got it all under control at the district. The kiddos are fine. But it's the district, it's the city that's messed up, or the community that's messed up. And, let's just remember the kiddos that are in the schools came from the community. And when they leave the schools, they go back into the community. And so the future is interlinked for all of us. Councilmember Althauser talked about the 13 of you as leaders in the community struggling with safety and equity and fairness and inclusion, and asked, if we haven't been fulfilling that responsibility, then how do we change that? What do we do that's different so that we can have a safer, more equitable, fairer, and inclusive community? How best do we lead that community as allies and as abolitionists? So we really just wanted to set this up as an opportunity for you to sort of brainstorm and share ideas. There's probably a lot we could talk about, and I call it sort of modified brainstorming, because I want to make sure that if somebody puts something out there, we all have a chance to understand it, and follow up on it a little bit. But I also want to create enough space that everybody has a chance to put things out there. And so I would ask you to just be mindful of the 13 other folks here and make sure everybody gets to talk. We will be writing these down. I'm not as skilled as Eileen is to pop up a Google thing with Post-its and whatnot. So, I just type things in Word. So I will be typing along, and both Sean and I will try to sort of follow up and keep the conversation going. But, raise your hand or do it. Y'all have been doing a great job for 5 of these. So let's see what we can come up with.
So just to clarify, when you say see what we come up with, is it to answer those 2 questions? How do we prevent and how do we address, or was it something else?
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about, how do we work together in a manner that reduces the likelihood of this type of events and discriminatory or racist or practices occurring in our community. And on the flip side of that, if and when it does occur, whether in the community, in the schools, how do we respond in a healthy way that makes a positive difference or works to shift that culture? Because we both have the prevention and response if we're going to get to really shifting a culture in a way that makes a community where everyone feels welcomed and respected and valued. So that's kind of what we want to open up with you to start that conversation about how we work together in that regard.
So I think this kind of event are always going to happen. So we can't prevent them, but we can proactively resolve them as parents or as community leaders. So from that angle, say if we have an incident of what happened at Capital High School happened in Tumwater or in our school district, I will hope that the school district will get involved, not to apportion blame, but to resolve that issue. I mean, as soon as it occurs, before it gets out of hand, because in those situations, both the parents whose kid is done wrong and the parents whose kid is done wrong to are both in this battle, and none of them will yield any space. So having an adult in the room to settle that right away before it becomes a media issue is the best way to go. We cannot prevent that from happening. It's going to happen. It's just when and where. So communication from the school district to that particular school as soon as possible. Don't wait. I mean, I know that we have to, because of privacy issue and what have you, but the school district can proactively get involved and settle that, nip it in bud right away before it becomes a bigger issue.
And I would just add what Peter said there about communication. And I think I couldn't hear a little bit at the end, but I think it was something to the effect of maybe nip it in the bud. Was that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would just offer the example of Superintendent Patrick Murphy at Olympia. I think how he handled that was absolutely brilliant. He didn't wait around to respond to that crisis. As soon as it happened, he responded to the community, to the families immediately. And his email response, I was able to read that, and he didn't play around. He didn't pull any punches. He said, this is not acceptable. And I think the thing that stuck out for me most about that, and I will offer it to everyone, and again, these are not my words, they're what Superintendent Patrick Murphy of Olympia wrote. But I think the thing that really stuck out for me is that he mentioned that, and this is something we all hear, when racist incidents like this happen, whether it's in schools, you know, talk show host, an athlete, whenever something happens where it's called to attention, what we usually hear right afterwards in the response statement is, well, this is not who we are. This is not our community, right? But Superintendent Murphy said, no, this is who we are. This is our community. And we need to make sure we address that and stop walking around on eggshells. You know, I was talking to President Taylor last night, and he made an excellent point about we have policies in place. And that really resonated with me. President Taylor knows what he's talking about on that point. We do have policies. We need to enforce what we have. We need to remember that we are elected officials who all raised our hand and swore an oath to the Constitution. And the Constitution says, we, the people of the United States, the preamble, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. We all swore to that. It's our job to go ahead and make sure that happens for our children, our students, our community, that we're making sure that we're doing everything we can to give them the safety that they need. And to know when these incidents happen, we are going to step in and nip it in the bud immediately, and there's not going to be a wishy-washy response to it. That just cannot happen. But I think the fact that we're all meeting, and I've said this before, just the sheer representation on our school board, the city council, that speaks a lot. That speaks volumes to where we are in our community. We were all elected, right? And our community voted for us. And I think that speaks well to our community. So while we're discussing, and I always try to have this balance, while we're discussing the atrocities of things that happen, we must remember who we are and the blessing of our community and how wonderful it truly is. And that will be how we get to the places we all want to be. That's it.
Go, Casey.
Thank you. Sorry. I wanted to jump in and kind of, I don't know, maybe just get an educational opportunity here that this board and this school district, we work in policy. And that's where the majority of our work resides. We don't go down to the operational level. We don't go down the teacher or building level to make sure they're doing something or that they're enforcing something. We have the policies in place. I truly believe the work this district did long before most of this board was around educational equity and racial equity, and the policies that were put in place, I believe, are more of the reason as to why we're not in the news instead of a lack of cameras. It may be a lack of cameras, that's possible for sure. But we have these policies in place, and if there is a issue, and I keep hearing this is happening in our schools, and I can't dispute that. And if it's happening, then we have a fear of intervention. The policies are in place, the tools are there, the mechanisms are available. If something's happening, if racial slurs are being said, we know who's saying them. Teachers hear it, administrators know it, students report it. These are happening. We need to focus and enable our administrators and people in the building to follow the current policies. I feel like what happens in North Thurston and Olympia, quite frankly, it doesn't impact Tumwater. Am I aware of it? Absolutely. Do I want to be like that? No. We need to make sure that we're following our existing policies. And I think we're losing sight of that on some level. And I just want to make sure this group knows that that's where the school board operates, mostly in the policy level. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody saw it. There's a question that Eileen put up in the chat, and I think it's particularly germane to our school board members and to our mayor about what kind of support does the school district need to ensure swift and responsive communication about hate incidents? What kind of support does the school district need to ensure quick and responsive intervention when students commit racist acts? And, you know, do you see that as, do you see a role in there for the city or policymakers, elected officials in the city to make a statement, make a comment, intervene in some way, provide support? And what could that look like if you do?
Michael, I think.
Michael?
Yeah, I don't know too much about, and I know that they're pretty still sort of recruiting members, but I was sort of looking at the Social Justice and Equity Commission that Olympia has established. And it's, I'm trying to think in terms of structure. Like in 2017 in Tumwater, there were two young Black men walking on Tumwater Hill and they got chased by a truck. And it was all over the news. And they were students in the Tumwater School District, I believe, but it didn't happen on school property, right? But that incident, you know, that's going to carry with them. That's going to affect how they handle school. I mean, I'm making, you know, vast assumptions, but I would assume that would be the case. And if I remember the quotes from the paper correctly, you know, they discussed a pretty high degree of trauma resulting from that incident. So I'm kind of wondering if they're like, if I'm wondering how that played out in terms of like, where does a member of the community go to either the school board or to the city, probably in that case, because it didn't happen on school grounds? Where does that person turn to? And I don't think we have a clear venue for a place where someone can lodge a concerning incident like that, and then some kind of governmental entity investigates it and looks into it further, other than filing a police report, which that did happen, and the police looked into it further. But I can think of other hypothetical examples where maybe a crime hasn't been committed, but a concerning incident did occur, where there wasn't a governmental body to then investigate it. So I guess I'll sort of throw out maybe a hypothetical idea where if we did establish an advisory entity like a Social Justice and Equity Commission, but instead of Olympias, I think it could be really powerful if there was members of the community on it, but also representation from the school board as well as the city, because we do know that these systems are so intertwined. I think that could be a pretty powerful body and a powerful statement. I think that is a very nascent idea. And, you know, it's also something that I think we would probably need to have a robust conversation with the community about, to make sure that that's something that people feel is necessary and want and need, and that we make sure that we're asking the right people the right questions about what that looks like, about if it's necessary. But I think part of the problem is that there isn't just a very clear avenue or place for people to turn when they want government to take a deeper look into something along those lines. But I'm very interested in hearing if other people sort of see that as a gap, or if there are systems I'm not aware of that if I were more educated about, that maybe that's my own ignorance sort of poking out that I'm not sort of aware of entities or systems or policies like President Taylor mentioned that currently exist to address something like that.
you know, I might share just connected to that, that oftentimes when those involve students, and in my experience particularly, is that often the first people who, if it's on the weekend, it might be a police report, but oftentimes we learn about that in the school, and the starting point for that sometimes in the collaboration is between our school administrator, and perhaps in some cases, if we go, okay, this happened in the community and it's related to that, might involve a school resource officer starting a conversation to say, how might we partner between the school district and the city to address this? And that's probably the most cooperative structure we have currently for that. And what you're speaking to is potentially another level. So. And one of the things that I'd maybe just bring into this conversation as you're thinking on this, because I really like and appreciate, I mean, we've had this discussion about what it looks like to really get on top of this and address an issue right away, is what does it look like to address it immedately and in a way that is healthy and responsive? Because we've been having these discussions about restorative justice as opposed to a more traditional punitive approach to addressing things. And I think when something like this happens, there is an instinct of us all to go, we need to get tough on this and so I think it's important for us to discuss when we're not in that moment, what does it look like to address this in a manner that improves the situation rather than exacerbating it. And I think that's a struggle that every principal and every and certainly anyone, even as our law enforcement works on what does punitive versus restorative look like, to address an issue when it comes up that hits us all in a very personal place, and do so in a manner that is restorative, or is that not a value in this group if we were addressing an issue like that? And I think it's important to know what our leadership thinks in
that. I would follow that with an example. So we talked about this issue. Some of you know that the leadership team at the city has also been doing the 21-day equity challenge. And we've been doing it week by week, sort of in 1 day, 1 week intervals. And so one of our last conversations we had about that, we talked about the incident at Capitol High School. And one of the things we talked about is that sort of gut reaction, particularly having been through sort of, some amount of training. The gut reaction is, well, what would you have done if you were, sitting behind these people at the basketball game and this happened right in front of you? And the immediate sort of gut response is, I'd have stood up and yelled at them, you are racists. You are bad people. This needs to stop. You need to shut up. I mean, it's like a very sort of like, I have to intervene in this. And this is the core of Sean's question is, do we respond to things in that sort of style? Or have we thought through in advance, how would I respond to that situation? Because, we have an opportunity to either help that student learn and grow and develop and have that be a positive, hopefully, experience and sort of their path to adulthood, or we can just make them angrier. And we can just sort of escalate the whole thing and turn it into some sort of angry incident that everyone remembers, not for what it could have been, or remembers it for all the wrong reasons, I guess.
Well, I just want to jump in really quickly, John, and thank you for your thoughts on that. I just want to remind folks here that these are very highly charged emotional incidents. Okay, I'm trying to figure out the right words to say here, but when these types of incidents happen, they are highly charged. And I don't know if we're in that moment applying, it's one thing to talk about how we're going to apply, but in that moment, it's very emotional for everybody involved, right? So we have to just remember that. I think that's all I want to say is just remember in these moments, it's highly charged and we're talking about it, but I mean, I myself have been a victim of all kinds of remarks, words, stuff that happened to me. And in some instances I had allies or a person to put their hand on the flagpole, and sometimes I didn't. But nonetheless, it was emotional for not only me, who was being the victim I guess, because that's what you are. You're a victim of harassment, bullying, intimidation, but it's also emotional for everybody else involved too. It's an emotional thing for everyone. And again, I just want to go back to President Taylor's point about policy. And while I can appreciate Sean's thoughts and asking for our thoughts and opinions, I can do that, but at the same time, our hands are tied. You know, we're to set the policy and to see our leaders in our schools carry out those things to effect. And I worry that we might be stepping over a line, and I don't want that to happen. But I did want to just reiterate that point about emotion and just keeping that in mind, that everybody's affected, not just the person being insulted, harassed. Hope that makes sense.
It does. Can I add to Lori's comment?
Go ahead, Leanna.
Thank you. You know, there's a lot of discussion about electeds in our role, and I appreciate Lori bringing that up and realizing we represent all of our constituents, no matter their affiliation, their preference, right? And trust me, I get a ton of emails of what I'm doing wrong and what they don't like, right? And we still represent because of our community. So someone had asked me a question regarding tonight as that moving forward piece of taking all these elements and what would it look like? What does unity look like? What is us coming together, right? What does it look like for the city and the school district to come out with a statement? And that could be a new policy when issues arise that we want to set the tone. We want to talk about how we care about people, right? Tumwater believes in people. It's an acronym, the things that we stand for. It applies to everything, not just our policy, right? But yes, we have lanes that we work in. And it doesn't mean that we can use our voice to share what we will accept and we will not tolerate. So what would it look like moving forward from this? If the school district and the city come out with a statement regarding what does a safe and equitable community look like in Tumwater, even reference the policies we want, how we enforce those policies. And what does it look like moving forward to do that? So my jam is doing, you know, SMART goals. So I don't want to lose any of this, but I think we have an opportunity to use our voice collectively and show unity. And so that's one of the suggestions that someone had asked me.
I'm hearing, well, we know it's in the community and it's in the schools. So how do we reduce it and prevent it? How do we prevent these acts? So what is the policy? Like Leanna said, what's your policy at the school board for schools? So how are we educating, right? How are we teaching about this type of behavior? Are we conducting seminars? Are we doing classes quarterly, maybe semi-annually? So I think it's important for us to discuss it. We're discussing it here, which is good, a major first step. Thank you, John Doan, for putting this together. But let's bring this out there. Let's have the kids discuss it. Let's have the teachers discuss it. I think that's, you know, that's a kind of mitigation to go forward.
John?
I feel extremely frustrated by this conversation because I, as a council member, don't want to stick my nose or my something into the school's business, and I don't think the school wants to do that. We are two different entities serving a community, but we have different constituencies, and it's a delicate thing. I mean, I've been a teacher, so I know what it's like to, you know, wish there was somebody there to help or whatever. As a teacher, I wouldn't have taken something to the school board. That wouldn't have been my first thing. And as has been said here, the school board didn't come to my classroom to check on me. You know, things are separated by who you are and what role that you're in. And I think that I'm just trying to figure out how we honor each other's roles, and we don't expect too much. I mean, in terms of the school has its responsibilities to the students. I don't have that daily thing. I used to, I don't have that. And depending on what atmosphere we're in, city council or school, we have really different, we have different responsibilities. I mean, I'm just frustrated by how we keep talking about us coming together and doing something together and doing that. And I, having been a teacher, I've served on a school board and, you know, worked with young kids everywhere from playgrounds to bus driver to all kinds of things. And so you see, some of this is human nature, but I'm having a hard time figuring out what it is that we could do together that helps racism at Capitol High School, or that makes a difference in how the city wants to handle or up our game in the community in some way. And I've been sitting here all this time and just trying to think about it from where I'm coming from and from my experience, and I still don't see it. So that's probably not real helpful. That's just kind of honest about where I am, and I desperately want to do something, you know. So anyway, that's my comment at the moment.
I'd love to, can I interject a reflection that I hopefully will be helpful? I want to take us back to the story that Peter told us, you know, when we were having our conversation, because I heard a number of things in there that seem actionable. Because I heard Peter actually ask, what are parents of color supposed to do, right? So I don't know, Peter, you can please correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but I'm hearing a need for support for families and communities of color, in response to that, to know that there are families out
Eileen, I'm gonna just interrupt you real quickly, just because we do have an equity advisory committee that I am the chair of on the board, and Scott sits on as well. And those parents of color, I really hate of color. Again, we all have color. Are coming to our meetings as well as the white parents. And we've had really great turnout and participation. So we do have a vehicle in place now for our parents of color to come and discuss. And there have been wonderful discussions. And at the end of the day, that is the most important thing, is communication and understanding. And while everybody's so anxious and eager to do something, we're doing it. We're doing it right now. We're talking about it. We're listening to each other. We're hearing other people's stories. That's what you do. You communicate, and you put yourself in uncomfortable conversations that maybe make you feel weird because, oh, that's something I never even considered. But that is the work. We are doing the work. And I think that we should all take a deep breath and realize that this is part of the process. And anybody who's studied this knows that the progress we're making now might not be felt for 7 years later. It's a piece by piece, brick by brick process. And I've said before, I look around at every person in this room, Zoom room, and I know that you're all committed. And that right there is action. And we should be proud of that. And not beat ourselves up because we're not doing tangible things. This is a tangible thing. We're talking about it. We're listening to parents. I am available to anyone who wants to speak to me and talk about anything or bring something to my attention. That is how I view my role. Other board members might not, but for me, that's what I do. And I think right now, today, in light of all the situations that are happening in other high schools, it's wonderful to talk about it. But we're never going to get out ahead of it. We're going to talk about it and be aware that it can happen. But we're not going to do anything preventative to stop that. Somebody already said it's human nature. Might have been Mayor Sullivan. I can't remember who said it, but that is the nature of the beast. But the fact that we're here and we're wanting to talk about it, I feel so much frustration from everyone. And I just think we should really do better in saying, yes, we are making a difference. Yes, we are listening to each other. Yes, we are talking about it. And that's what we need to do. I'm glad I heard Councilman Agabi tonight. I'm glad I heard that story. I'm glad I heard from Councilmember Jefferson. I'm glad I just heard from Councilwoman Kathy and everybody else that spoke tonight. That is the work right now. That's all.
And here I'm picking up on frustration from a couple folks, and I just want to take an opportunity to kind of hopefully to reframe a little bit. This conversation is really not meant to be critical of any of the work that you have done or perceived to have not done. It's an opportunity to say, I know for sure that Olympia School District, Olympia community would say it's been doing work. North Thurston for certain would say they've been doing years and years of work, right? And yet, so this is an opportunity to say, how do we take that moment to restate our values, to reaffirm our commitments, to make the work we're doing visible to our communities so they know what the resources are should something happen? You know, this is in no way, shape, or form meant to be, you know, an indictment of like, what are you doing? What are you not doing? It really is a moment to say, like, let us definitely celebrate our successes and the relationships we built. The fact that you've done this challenge, the fact that you're meeting together is a huge resource and a huge gift. So I want to affirm all of those things. I just want to get a sense of where that frustration is coming from. I hope I in no way meant to communicate that I personally feel that you're lacking in some way. My hope was to open a conversation about like, how can you use experiences that are happening in neighboring communities who have also been very committed in the same ways that you are to doing racial equity work with their students? How can you take their experiences and be ready and be prepared? And you know, I think that the idea that it's human nature, I think those of us who work in education believe that we have an opportunity, right? That's our job, is to say, what does it mean for us to be involved in human nature, especially when people are young and developing? And that's the hope that I hold on to. That's the reason I work in education, is to say that, you know, these things aren't inevitable. We can make, again, just looking at abolitionism, I wonder if people at that point just said it's always going to be human nature, or hey, maybe we can get rid of slavery in this country, right? So just to think, like, what does that mean to have that kind of aspirational hope, and the audacity to believe that we could have a community that was free of racism? What would that look like? It might be years in the making, but what would it look like if we started today? So I just wanted to kind of open that up and reframe, maybe to everyone take a deep breath for a second, because I can sense like the frustration. So I just, again, wanted to just own that if my impact was that you feel criticized by me or by, you know, by the conversation we've engaged in, I just wanted to say I am deeply sorry for that. I did not mean for it to sound like a criticism, and to offer my hope that you can take this moment as an opportunity.
You know, and I hope that you didn't hear what I was saying as being critical of anything that we've done all this time or anything. I don't feel that way at all. I think my frustration is that I know that all of us want to do something. We want to make it better for the community, for the kids, for each other, all of those things. I think maybe we're trying too hard to come up with something like a policy or a something. So, you know, Director Lori said, you know, we've done a lot of work in these times that we've been together, and maybe we need to sit with it for a while as two separate entities. Maybe the city needs to talk about this among ourselves. I mean, we've never had conversations about these kinds of things before, and maybe we're trying too hard to, you know, put together something something that's going to be a big fix before we kind of digest some of what is needed. I think that's what I was trying to say. You know, we bring a lot of heart and talent and smarts and everything in this group together. And so, you know, we don't have to rush to figure this out by, you know, next week. But we don't meet anymore. But anyway, so I apologize if I sounded like I was being critical of what we're saying or what we're trying to do. I'm not at all. I'm feeling every bit of it.
Dr. Melissa, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's powerful for us to say what we are doing, that what we are doing is encouraging conversations. You know, I think it's powerful to say that we know this is happening in our community, and the way that we are addressing it is through policy, is through, providing opportunities for our staff, but also for providing space for conversation. And I also hope that we would see this as a learning opportunity for anyone, not just students, but anyone who was engaged. I would love to know the answer of how, if I witnessed something, like what I would do. Yes, it's very emotional, but at some point, that, you know, one of the reasons that I understand is that sometimes when nothing happens, it does make it look like the whole community feels that way. Sometimes this communication is not for Tumwater, it's for everyone else who's going to judge Tumwater on this one particular thing that may happen. And I was on the school board when the Confederate flag came out at Bush Middle School, right? And so we were judged for that incident. And that's why we have a policy now. That's why we have an education, advisory council. That's why, equity advisory council. That's why we have these things in place, because of that particular incident. And in that particular time, I think staff felt, that tradition was more, that looking at tradition versus questioning, I think about the wheel that Matthew had shown earlier, like not wanting to change or not wanting to question what we have always done was part of this thing. And it's something that I think we as a board have been trying to suggest, is it's okay to question things and it's okay to change things. So the whole do thing, I get where everyone's coming from, but why wouldn't we just say, here's what we're doing? And why wouldn't we say, if something happened in Tumwater, yes, we understand and we are working at it, and here's what we are doing. And, and not say, and I agree with Lori. I loved what Patrick said about this is our community. And so we embrace our community, and we also embrace this challenge that we have, which is to provide space to talk about it.
Eileen?
Oh, thank you. I was thinking about what Lori shared, and then Peter, and now this part, and then what Lietta tried to combining these things that, because there is something in place, like we talk about our policies, and I didn't know that there was an equity committee at Tumwater, in Tumwater School District, and I really appreciate, because sometimes, the people just assume that nothing's being done. So I understand, especially my daytime job, that they just assume that things aren't being done, but there are, policies in place, and there are ways to go. And so what I hear here is communication, and for people, for parents, and like what Leah was talking about, that perhaps in view of a statement coming out that that this has happened, we recognize this, and if if parents are feeling this way and have any questions, or feeling that they having a place to go to, that this is what we've put in place, and we do have this council that's available to parents, and and just communicate and let them know the tools that are available, the resources that are in place.
Eileen, that's what I was trying to say. You said it a lot better. So thank you for circling back.
Well, thank you, because I realized, like Peter, you know, he's a very engaged parent at his school, and he, you know, at a loss, what do I do? You know, what do I do? So yeah, and so I think communication is very important.
Well, recognizing we have a little less than 10 minutes left, here we are in this place of, I think one of the things that we want to think about is we now have to think forward, and you've started to offer that already, is we come to the end of this night and we've done this work, and then saying, how do we continue a partnership in a positive way? Is it that each entity needs to go back and have some personal reflection? And then what does it look like to continue to move forward on this in the places where we intersect, or where things can, where we can do work together? I think that needs, I think John and I are going to take all these notes and go back and try to connect and say, where do we go from there? And so we have this last opportunity in these remaining minutes to talk, if there's any ahas or any thoughts about what you see that looking like from your perspective. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of close with some of those reflections. Mayor Sullivan.
So I would just say that, and I'm sure the school board finds this, and I know in the city, we get into our silos and we know our information, but other people don't know our information. And so it's that constant educating, constant thing. And I'll just use Capitol Boulevard redesign for an example. We've been working on that for a multitude of years. And until we start digging up the street, nobody knows that we've done anything because they didn't come to the meeting. People are busy with their lives. We wonder why people don't come to budget meetings, because people are busy with their lives until it hits them in the face, and then they want to know. So I think the hardest part for us is coming up with that strategy of how do we keep the public informed and educated, and how do we make the resources easier for them to find? I think that is really, really a difficult task. And I know we feel like we spin our wheels a lot doing that. And then somebody comes up and you say, hey, we've been doing that for 10 years or whatever. And so I don't know the easy fix to that. And I know that we're now in a society where people are tired and frustrated and angry and burnt out, and they don't want to have to search very deep for this information. So I think one of the strategies we need to do is, how do we make this information easier for individuals to find, and for parents and for citizens and all of that. And I know that's not easy because everybody does it in a different way. Everybody has different styles of finding information. So I think that might be one task of, we do have great things and a lot of work in place. How do we let people know what that is?
John?
I think I'd follow up on that and say, I was just thinking about it. So how are we going to report out what we've been doing? I mean, through, to the school district, and say, we've been meeting with a city and these are some of the things we've been working on, and where do we put that in the city's communication, and just let the public know that we have been talking, we have been working at this, we're in this together. We don't have any of the answers yet, or we can't say what exactly all the quote next things are, but I think we should tell this story of what we've done here together, so the community knows that. And I think that's a big step, because I doubt that a lot of people even know that we all know each other, or let alone are working together. So I would like to see that as a first step, and see what we want to share. And, John and you higher ups that are going to put this all together, superintendent. You know, what do we want this? What do we want the whole city to know through our communication? What we've done together and what we're hopeful about and what you might be hearing as we go along. So that's my suggestion. What you can write down on your paper, John.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just want to say a real quick thank you to Eileen and Matthew for moderating. And then also, I just want to say a quick thank you to all the council members for being a part of it. And again, circling back to the point, we're doing the work, we're talking about it, and I think that's a big deal. And to your point, Joan, I think the fact that these are recorded sessions and they are on YouTube for the public to view, that's one way of getting the word out that we are indeed working together and collaborating to have these discussions. And that, again, is a big deal. As somebody already said, this doesn't always happen, what's going on right now with the city council and the school board. So that in itself is a victory for our community. So to end it for me, again, it's just about gratitude and being thankful for so many souls being willing to come up and have the conversations and share their personal stories and within their lived experience and their journeys to this point. So thank you all very much. Your time is very much appreciated.
So a quick recap. I think what has been said is very, very good. And I would like to urge the school district and the city council, whomever is going to put this story together, to make sure that it goes out to the parents, to the kids. I received communication from my kids' teacher of everything they've done. And about the equity issue, I didn't even know they have one. And I try to go through the packages that come all the time. So we've done good things here, and I know I'm kind of new. And if I didn't know about this, then you know many parents don't know about this. I mean, we should tell our story. We're gonna have issues, but if we're telling our stories now, that this is what we're doing, that goes a long way to solve our problem in the future. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Eileen and Matthew, do you want to close us out here?
I just am deeply grateful for the amount of engagement and passion and you know, deep levels of caring that you're all exhibiting for this topic, for this community, and for the kids, especially in this community. And I think you know, I think you're again, this is like a huge resource that you have here, just this willingness to be here and to have these brave conversations. And so, yeah, just deep appreciation. And thank you all so much for allowing us to be part of it.
Yeah, I just really see all of your hearts and just really appreciate you for showing up and speaking your truth and leaning into discomfort and building relationships. I mean, you know, we've done that. Like we've had a lot of really intense conversations and built relationships as a part of this process. And that takes trust and leaning in and being vulnerable and doing all the things. So just I really appreciate you all.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say that this was a tough mission, but we did it. Very productive. Thank you all, everybody.
Good. Okay, well,
practicing non-closure, right? Like this is just the start of this.
Exactly. Well, Sean and I will get together and we will talk more about this. We will engage more with all of you and reflect on our organizations. And I think there's more opportunities. I would encourage everyone to just continue to think about these questions, and things may come to you, and feel free to pass those forward, and we'll continue to work. Again, this is extraordinary to have 5 consecutive joint city and school district leadership meetings. This is pretty special stuff, and I hope you celebrate that. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of it. Thank you, Eileen and Matthew, too.
Yes, thank you all. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you.